Started now. So good morning, everybody, and a very warm welcome to you all. Thank you for joining us for the 6th edition of our online Melia Business Breakfast series. For which we are delighted to be joined by the Right Honourable Lord Mayor of the City of London, Alderman William Russell. We will shortly be beginning the session with an introduction from Eduardo Barachina, who is the President of the Spanish Chamber of Commerce in the UK, following which Juan Botin from our patron member Santander will provide a brief biographical introduction of our guest speaker. The Lord Mayor will then be sharing his insight with us on the effects of the pandemic, as well as of Brexit on the economic and commercial activity in the City of London, before which we will have plenty of time for you to ask him any questions that you might have. You can refer to the instructions that you can see on the screen at the moment regarding the 3 ways in which you can submit your questions for the Minister. We will do our best to answer as many of these as we have time for. We will also be, we're delighted to be joined by Nick Collier, who is the Managing Director of the Brussels office of the City of London, for the Q&A part of the session. Okay, without further ado, I'm now going to hand over to the Chamber's President, Eduardo Barachina.
You're on mute.
Eduardo, you're on mute.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining the Melia Breakfast Business Meeting. A special welcome to all of you who are joining today from Spain. We're delighted to have you here. We're pleased to welcome today the Lord Mayor of the City of London. It's, I believe, the first time the Spanish Chamber of Commerce does an event with the City of London. And the timing is perfect. We know that in 6 months, the United Kingdom will be leaving the European Union formally and effectively, and that the role of the City of London will then be changed, and we all have to ensure that it plays it makes the same contribution it's making now to finances. It's extraordinary how much from the square mile transactions shape and reshape economy. Very often transactions close in the City of London have a huge impact in Europe, in the Middle East, in Africa, because it's such a small habitat which congregates the best talent in the world. And in that talent, I think it's worth to say that Spanish banks, Spanish insurance companies, and Spanish lawyers play a critical role. The City of London has, for Spanish banks, insurance companies, and Spanish law firms, and all in their way make a huge contribution. In addition, there's a lot of Spanish talent in non-Spanish in foreign banks, foreign law firms, and so on. And that's why in this context, Lord Mayor, of change, in this context of uncertainty, I think it's great that you spend some time with the Spanish companies, and Spanish companies spend some time listening to you. You have a very important role as a spokesman of the city. You meet dignitaries from all the world, I mean, probably now virtually, but I think it's very important that we all listen to you carefully. And I encourage everyone later to formulate questions. We do hope in the not too distant future, Lord Mayor, to welcome you personally and physically. Without further ado, I will now leave Vice President Juan Botin to make the biographic introduction to you. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Juan Botin, and I am the UK Director of Santander and Vice President of the Spanish Chamber of Commerce in the United Kingdom. Thanks you very much for joining us today for our Melia Business Breakfast webinar, for which we have the honor and privilege of welcoming the Right Honourable Lord Mayor of the City of London, Alderman William Russell, as our guest speaker. The Lord Mayor began his career at First Boston Corporation before joining Merrill Lynch as an investment banker. He is currently chair of CDM, a London-based asset management business, and senior advisor of STJ Advisor. He also previously served on the board of Innovate Finance, the industry body for the UK-based fintech community, and also an educated entrepreneur. He took office at the 692nd, the Lord Mayor of London, in November 2019. In this capacity, he's an international ambassador for the UK financial and professional services sector while heading the City London Corporation, the governing body of the Square Mile. He both works and resides at Mansion House, which, located in the heart of the city, provide a spectacular setting for regular business meetings, civil and library activities, and conferences, including Global UK Trade, Innovation and Culture, and the annual speech by the Chancellor of the Exchequer to the international financial community. In this regard, the Financial Forum of the Spanish Chamber of Commerce, which was established 5 years ago, provide a successful meeting place for senior Spanish representatives from the finance sector based in London, and from where we observe the implications that the Brexit could bring to the city as an international financial hub. The Spanish banking industry had maintained a strong presence in the UK market for many years. In particular, Santander, we have a leading position among the top 5 financial institutions in the UK, with the aim of helping people and businesses to prosper. The current global situation caused by COVID-19 pandemic and the future of the City of London after Brexit are extremely significant topics, and we are fortunate that the Lord Mayor can share his insight with all of us today. Many thanks again, Lord Mayor, for joining us this morning, and now I hand over to you. Thanks.
Lord Mayor, I think we cannot hear you.
Hear me. Is that better? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Sorry, let's start again. The famous line I've decided for COVID-19 will be "you're on mute" is going to be the phrase we'll all remember. Anyway, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to join you all today for this online event. And many thanks to the Spanish Chamber of Commerce for bringing us all together, particularly during these unprecedented times. We have met today to explore the long-standing relationship between the City of London and Spain and discuss areas of opportunity for strengthening that relationship. Our two countries are intertwined by centuries of history, a shared appreciation for each other's cultures, and a strong trade and business partnership. One characteristic deeply embedded into both our systems is a profound love of football. And on a personal note, it was a great occasion to visit the home of Real Madrid back in 2018, even if they did beat my favorite team, Liverpool. But then, of course, I was also in Madrid in 2019 when Liverpool won the European Cup. Over the last few months, football is just one of the many luxuries that our two countries have foregone in order to protect our citizens in this health crisis. Both Spain and the UK have been hit by coronavirus. It has impacted every segment of our waking life, no more so than in the world of work. Businesses and individuals everywhere have had to adapt to a new way of working, myself included. Now, as Lord Mayor, my principal role is to act as an international ambassador for UK financial and professional services. This means usually over 100 days of my year in office is spent abroad, meeting with government officials and business leaders overseas to deepen the UK's international relationship. For obvious reasons, recently this has not been possible. However, like everyone else, I have learned to adapt to the circumstances, and like many people, had never come across Zoom or Teams until COVID-19. So despite the pandemic, I have continued my engagement with Europe through virtual visits. With the support of the UK government's Department for International Trade, I've attended meetings and webinars with European business leaders to understand the challenges the continent is facing due to the crisis. I've also been speaking a lot to industry, engaging with city firms, overseas investors, and UK global partners. Through these online engagements, I have gained an understanding of European stakeholders' immediate responses and concerns for the UK. And most importantly, I've discussed how we must refocus finance to drive an economic recovery, not just within the UK or Europe, but across the world. Many of the financial firms I've spoken to have adjusted well to life in lockdown. Steadfast respect for the rule of law and pre-existing agreements by UK government and regulators has assured business during these uncertain times. And although the majority of staff are working from home, there's been remarkable consistency in productivity levels. We are beginning to look at options for getting people back into the office. However, one of the city's biggest concerns is transport, which is why we are continuing to have daily conversations with Transport for London to ensure industry concerns are being communicated on this. And as we begin planning for life after COVID, we must think not only how we can recover, but how we can build back better. Many firms that I've spoken to have emphasized the importance that the recovery must be green. Like on the way down, ESG is outperforming on the way back, with a particularly strong focus on the social and the governance side of things. Building back better must be at the forefront of our minds, and we are working to ensure attention is given to this green recovery. Looking to the future also means we cannot ignore the upcoming departure of the UK from the EU. With respect to the financial services industry, we are looking for structured cooperation with our European friends. And we want to be certain both the UK and EU's economic growth and investment is supported, minimizing disruption and the social and economic consequences of the changed relationship. While we recognize the December 2020 deadline is ambitious, our conversations with industry show that businesses in the sector are prepared. The UK and EU are rightly prioritizing the need to tackle the COVID-19 outbreak and the welfare of their people. We are pleased to see that negotiations have regained prominence in government communications and press over the last few days and weeks. We appreciate that firms have undertaken a significant amount of planning for the event of no deal over the past few years, and we have learned from business they are prepared for all potential outcomes. We greatly support and thank firms for their continued contingency planning so we may mitigate against the effects of Brexit and maintain the open character of the city. Needless to say, a positive future relationship with the European Union is in the interests of households and businesses on both sides of the channel. And we are encouraged by the further detail given by government on its desire to secure close regulatory and supervisory cooperation on financial services with the EU. Making up around 80% of the UK economy, the services sector is its lifeblood and vital to growth, with financial services contributing over 127 billion to our economy every year. Any future framework should recognise the sector's contribution. In devising a strong future framework, we hope the UK and EU will also continue to work closely together at a global level, addressing common challenges such as climate change, money laundering, and terrorist financing. In the UK, maintaining our strong relationship with Spain is of paramount importance. At over 28,000 UK-based employees of Spanish-owned firms, Spain represents more jobs in the UK's financial services industry than any other single European country. Santander UK alone employs over 23,000 people. In this, Santander is not alone. Their 14 million active customers in the UK are added to by the 5 million of Sabadell Bank through their ownership of TSB, also driving the UK's digital transformation. TSB's new technology hub in Edinburgh represents an exciting part of a £120 million investment in digital banking, to which Minister Grimstone has also pledged his support. And we very much welcome Spain's focus on fintech and sustainable finance. As a financial centre, the city is excellently placed to support Spain's ambitions to grow its green finance offer, as we have built the expertise and creative ecosystem to identify such financing solutions. As Spain begins to ease restrictions, the private sector is charged to restart and enable the global economic recovery. And we in the city are keen to support wherever we can and whatever we can. Already the city and Spain has a strong relationship. My predecessor, Sir Andrew Palmley, was proud to host King Philip and Queen Letizia on their state visit of the UK in 2017. And I was sheriff at the time, and it was an incredible occasion. As was Lord Mayor Charles Bowman, most impressed by his visit to Spain in 2018. It is this relationship which the city holds close. And as we look to move out of our current health crisis, we very much look forward to continue working with you. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lord Mayor. That was really interesting. So now we're going to have some time for Q&A with all of our participants. So please, everyone, do feel encouraged to write in with any questions that you have. You've been seeing on the screen the 3 options. So just to reiterate, there was a mobile number on there, or alternatively, you can also use the Q&A or even the chat tool that you can see at the bottom of your screen right now. So to make the first question, we are joined by Nacho Morais, who is of Frank Consulting, and he's also the treasurer of the Spanish Chamber of Commerce.
Nacho, hi.
Hi, thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Lord Mayor, for an excellent allocution to our audience. Very much appreciated. My first question comes from the fact that I think your position is one unique position amongst a lot of mayors in London, in which you are the Lord Mayor of an area where very little people live, but a lot of people work, and a lot of these people, they work for European banking institutions. And obviously, as you rightly underscored, we are now within the negotiation period, and a lot is at stake in this negotiation. There has been a lot of talk about the equivalence regime as the kind of theme that around which the negotiation is taking place. And my question would be dual. First, do you think that is the case, that it's the most likely outcome? And second, do you think just an equivalence regime is sufficient? And also, is it sufficiently stable? Because obviously equivalence depends on the stability of the regulations. So that's.
So I mean, I'll get Nick to jump in as well after I've said a few words. But at the moment, yes, it is around equivalence. The problem with equivalence is that it can be the 30 days is not really enough, and so that's something which I think we would hope would change. And there has been there was some news out yesterday, which I'll get Nick to talk about around that. But we believe. We're optimistic in the city because we think we have an ecosystem second to none, and it's critical for both our European counterparts and ourselves that we work closely together to make it work. It doesn't make a huge amount of sense for the industry suddenly to move everything out to different parts of Europe. As I said, we have the rule of law, we have this ecosystem, we have the center of fintech with the center of green finance. So we feel that good logic will prevail when it comes to it. Yes, there are going to be some tough negotiations, but we are optimistic that the City of London will still be the powerhouse that it was before we left and when we leave. But Nick, jump in and add to that.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. So, Nacho, I mean, equivalence is not a substitute for single market access, and we are realistic about that. So access passporting, for those of you in the financial sector, ends at the end of the year, but the sector is prepared for that. I mean, the Spanish entities are prepared with their UK operations, and the UK-based firms are prepared with their EU-based operations, so that customers on both sides get a continuation of service. And we think the sector is well prepared. And you're right in the sense that in the deal, in the draft free trade agreement, neither side has proposed full market access in financial services. Indeed, there's no free trade agreement anywhere in the world that gives you access in financial services except within the single market. So we will end up with two autonomous regimes, which of course are identical today. and will remain very similar for a long time to come, I'm quite sure. And the Lord Mayor referred to a statement that the UK government made yesterday, indicating its strong support for international standards like the Basel standard for banking, for example. So we hope that what you will end up with, which will be a stable equilibrium, will be a strong bilateral regulatory dialogue between the two sides. So the major regulatory bodies on the EU side, the Commission, obviously the ECB and the European supervisory agencies, and then the UK regulators, which will discuss each other's regulation as they go forward. Bits of equivalence are important. For example, the clearinghouse equivalence, I think, is very important, particularly for some of the European banks clearing in the London markets. But as the Lord Mayor says, London is going to remain a major international financial centre, in foreign exchange and commodity trading and reinsurance and capital markets, and increasingly in green finance and technology. And we think the European firms will continue to want to come here, but they're going to have to come here and establish here rather than doing it via a passport.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Nick and Lord Mayor. Okay, so for our next question, we're joined by Fernando Del Canto from Del Canto Chambers, who are actually the newest patron members of the Spanish Chamber of Commerce. So Fernando, over to you.
Good morning, Lord Mayor, and
Fernando.
thank you for joining us. And it is a pleasure to see you here, to see you joining the Spanish community. My question is going to be related to Spain in a different way. I mean, Spanish being the language largely spoken in South America. I know the continuous support that the Lord Mayor office has provided to any expansion of British firms and companies going to Latin America, especially Colombia, Mexico. And I would like to ask if in your plans, I mean, depending on travels and how things evolve next year, you are considering, how you say, not triangulating, but somehow joining forces with Spain and the Spanish companies to go to Latin America. So that's my question.
So you're absolutely right. Normally, the Lord Mayor travels 100 days a year, goes to 23 to 25 different countries, and we link in very closely with the Department of International Trade, the Treasury, so we know which countries to go. I did go to Mexico in December. I had a very good trip and launched a financial inclusion program with the Mexican government, funded by the Prosperity Fund. And you may know this, but over 50% of the people in Mexico do not have bank accounts. So this is where it was a fintech can come in, and financial inclusion. And I think they're discovering a lot of that now. And I think that COVID-19 is helping Mexico move that further ahead. But we worked very closely with I met the finance minister of Mexico, and we did a joint speech together, and we were working very closely with him. But I think where it would work with some of the Spanish companies, there's some of the Spanish companies who have investments in the UK or part of subsidiaries. I do take delegations. And the great thing about something around the fintech sector is it's not just UK companies, it's a lot of different companies, and a lot of them have come to London, and we have these fintech bridges around the world where we're going into fintech companies are coming to us as well as us going elsewhere. So what I would say with Spanish companies, if there is an interest to contact the Innovate and Growth team who help organize the trips at the corporation and find out where I'm headed next year. I suspect I won't travel much this year, but I know I was due to go to Brazil, Chile, so Latin America is very much on our list, and I'm sure there's some Spanish companies who are based in the UK, but also obviously based in Spain, that we could do things with as well. So it's a good idea, and I think it's the more collaboration we have, the better. And I know what a big, a large investor Spain is in the UK, and particularly in the city. So we're very willing to help if it creates jobs both in Spain and in London.
Thank you very much.
Great. Okay, so moving on to Nick, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add there, or should we move on?
No, no, thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so for our next question, we're talking with Johanne Almadaiki from Santander Bank, also patrons of the chamber. So over to you, Johanne, for the next question.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Lord Mayor, for being with us today and sharing your insights.
Good morning,
my
Janet.
question is more regarding on what do you think are the guarantees and incentives for Spanish businesses, both the ones that are already very well consolidated in the market and the disruptive startups, technological startups that want to invest or set up in the City of London? And the second question is, I know that we have been focusing on the financial sector, but which are the other sectors that you would highlight as opportunities for Spanish businesses that want to invest in the City of London?
Thank you, Hannah. So incentives and guarantee. I mean, we're at such a diverse international city that we are always keen to attract companies from outside. I went to San Francisco to meet a whole lot of venture capitalists, and they were very keen to invest, particularly in the fintech sector. I don't know enough of the detail of what incentives or guarantees there are, but what we do at the City of London Corporation, and Nick may know more about the incentive and guarantees, what we do at the City of London Corporation is we help a great many businesses set up in the City of London. And we will help with office spaces, go through the whole process. And we've done a lot of that with Chinese companies, with Australian companies. So it would be the same with Spanish companies. So the corporation has a whole department that will help with companies and give advice in that sector. I'll let Nick answer that bit in a minute, but just to answer your second question. For me, so my theme is trade, innovation, and culture. So I take the innovation bit, and the two most exciting sectors, well, three actually, because I think it's become very prevalent during COVID-19, is around fintech. And fintech includes regtech, insurtech, we are the fintech center of the world. We've had a wonderful regulatory regime that has created all these fintech companies. And you have seen during COVID-19 the digitization of businesses. I mean, businesses literally who had a 2 or 3 year plan those plans have come forward by in the last 3 months. You've seen payment, whether it's payment processing, whether it's the whole change that has gone on. Now, we knew that would happen, but it's now happening much more quickly. And of course, that is the challenge for Juan Botín and Santander and all the other banks, is what happens as far as, they've got all these branches. Are the branches going to be used as much? Because the digitization has just accelerated much faster. And so I think that sector will continue to grow. So I think that will continue to be a great sector. I think cybersecurity has become even more prevalent because of what's been going on with COVID, and I've been on a few cyber calls, but I saw yesterday that one of our cyber companies reported a huge increase in their profits over the period because of the cyber bit. And the third one, which I'm very excited about, is all around green finance and sustainable finance. I have a 22-year-old son who's just left Edinburgh University, who's applied to Imperial College to do a course on sustainable finance and climate change. One of the partners of Sequoia wrote 2 months ago in the FT, Sequoia being the big private equity firm, said, we didn't listen to the scientists over pandemic and COVID-19. Let's make sure we listen to the scientists over climate change. It is the next big thing. And COVID-19 has made businesses even more aware of what we've got to do around climate change. We have COP26 coming to the UK in November 2021. That's been postponed a year, but we're going to hold a summit in London in November, and it's called The Road to COP. And the phrase I use is, we need to build back better. And building back better is critical for the world as well as for the UK. And we all need to collaborate to make the world, to address climate change, get to zero emissions by 2050. So those would be the three sectors. But the one other thing that I think is critical for London, and people are beginning to shout about it, is our culture and heritage. London is one of the greatest cities in the world to live in. We have this incredible culture and the arts and the diversity that we have. And I hope that we do something to make sure we keep that culture going. It's great the museums and galleries are opening, but I am very concerned about all the theatres in London and how they may struggle. But I hope that answers your question. But Nick, you may want to add in, particularly on the first bit.
Well, so just two points really, Lord Mayor. One is, yes, we are very happy to help inward investment, and we work very closely with the government on that, both the team in the Corporation of London, but also with Innovate Finance. I mean, we're a key supporter of Innovate Finance, run by Charlotte Crosswell, which is a kind of London trade body for the sector, but really it's a global trade body because London is so dominant in it. And happy to work with them if there are Spanish fintech firms with questions. And as the Lord Mayor says, it ranges from, you know, all these new words we've had to learn, like RegTech, SupTech, supervisory technology, green tech, InsurTech. And of course, London has the global reinsurance market, which is very closely linked to the cyber question the Lord Mayor mentioned. And second point is that our public sector, our Treasury and our regulators have been very supportive of innovation. The sandbox run by the FCA, I think, has got a global reputation. In fact, Santander chair, Nathan Bostock from Santander chaired the Treasury's FinTech Steering Committee, which actually I used to sit on. So again, as the Lord Mayor said, we're incredibly open to both foreign firms, but also foreign skills and enterprise. And London has become this cluster of FinTech, which I think will remain open even after the end of the year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Johanny, for your question. Okay, thank you both, Lord Mayor and Nick. We're now joined by Adam Monday of the Melia Hotels International. It's good to have Adam with us this morning because were it not for the current situation with COVID-19, we would be holding this event at the Melia White House Hotel in central London. So that's definitely a shame, but I'm sure that Adam and the team would be delighted to welcome you both, Lord Mayor and Nick, for one of their delicious breakfasts once we're all able to again in the future. Okay, over to you, Adam.
Thank you. Good morning, Lord Mayor. I have some questions around the hospitality and tourism industry.
Yeah.
Yesterday, clearly the Prime Minister announced some great news. I'm looking forward to my first pint of Guinness. I can tell you very soon. But there's two questions in one, really. We are all excited to be reopening our businesses in the travel and tourism industry from the 4th of July. But clearly people have got used to working very differently. And this call is evidence of that. I would normally be hosting 50 people for breakfast in my hotel, and now we're doing it on Zoom. So the question is around the hotels, certainly in the City of London, that will normally be operating at high occupancies during the week for people traveling to work in the City of London. And now most of those offices have found new ways to do business. I know of some businesses in London that have asked their employees to work from home for the remaining part of the year. Now, tourism is also very important, but right now we have no air corridors available. So, how do you see hospitality and tourism recovering in general?
Adam, thank you. And just so you know, I'm a director of a hotel outside of London, so I know a small bit about it. But so firstly, we went from 2 to 1 meters, which was a good start, and we pushed hard. I work very closely with the chairman of policy, Catherine McGuinness, and she's on a daily it was daily, but a weekly meeting with the mayor of London, and so we pushed very hard for that to change. So the good news is that has changed. We've also pushed very hard about the 14-day quarantine. It makes no sense to us. And certain ministers, I think, agree with us. So there is a push. I'm confident that we will have some of the bridges, which will create. I mean, tourism, as you know, is a critical part of London and brings huge sums of money in, and hence my comment about the theatres and what Cameron McIntosh has said, not opening till 2021 is very bad news. So we're very conscious of it. And we will continue to push, and fingers crossed we'll start off some bridges, and then things will move forward, because as you know, that tourism season of July to August is critical for London, and we recognise that, and I think government does recognise it. It's a question of how we get there. As far as the city is concerned, I mean, I've done numerous calls with companies, and you are right, there are some companies who, to be frank, don't really want to come back, their employees to come back until January. But however, I also, I'm a big believer that the office is not dead. So hopefully that's good news for you. I think that most of the companies I talk to is the networking, the socializing, and the whole corporate culture. You cannot do all that on Zoom, and they see that. And look, today we would have had breakfast as much as we're now doing it on Zoom, but we would have been networking. I'm hearing names, but I'm not having conversations and networking, and that's a critical part of what the city and London is about. So I think it's going to be a slow comeback, but I like to say that I think things will get better for you. So hang in there, and I think there will be pent-up demand, and people will come in. Our biggest issue, as far as the office is concerned, is, as you quite rightly pointed out, 95 to 97% of the financial and professional services in the square mile are working from home. And to be frank, it's been very successful. More successful than I suspect they ever thought. But that doesn't mean that people don't want to come into the office. So it will be staggered, and there'll be a blue team and a red team. The younger generation are much keener to come back than the older generation. But I generally believe we will come back. As I said, it will be slow. I think September is when you'll see a greater amount come back, just because we're now moving into July. It's going to be, July is almost like a testing month, see how it works, and then but it's all about one word, really. It's confidence. Yeah. And that's what we're trying to do in the City of London Corporation, is create that confidence by making sure we have the walkways wider, bikes, and then the other big issue, as we know, is transport. And funny enough, my daughter is commuting in. I live just outside Cambridge, and she's catching an 8 o'clock train into Blackfriars, and it's empty. So no one is going on transport at the moment. So actually, I say, if you want to go on transport because it's empty. If you do need to go into the office, but it's that's the balance, and that will build. And it's going. Sadly, it will take time, but we're very conscious also within the square mile of the SMEs. A lot of people won't know this, but 99% of the businesses in the square mile are SMEs. And if we don't get people coming back, then those SMEs are going to struggle. And a lot of those SMEs are family firms, cafes, whatever. The Pretts and the Caffè Neros are going to be fine because they're big operations. And Catherine and myself have conversations every day. So what are we going to do to help that? And in a way, government is now that people can, July the 4th, they haven't officially said don't go to the office. So we'll be trying to work with the Mayor of London and government to try and encourage people back, to be frank, because otherwise those SMEs are going to really struggle over the next 2 or 3 months.
Thank you.
Nick, I don't know whether Nick wanted to add to that.
No, nothing to add to that. No, thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Loma.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, so next we're joined by Juan Morillo from Hispania Restaurants, who actually have their restaurant right outside their bank station. So Juan, over to you for your question.
Thank you, Hannah. Dear Lord Mayor, thank you for a most insightful talk. I represent the Hispania Restaurants, which is based in Lombard Street. And my question is a bit related to the previous one, but what is your view of the pace of the return of the employees in the city?
So firstly, you are in Lombard Street a neighbour, because as you know, the Lord Mayor lives in the Mansion House, so I must come and say hello, Juan, when we're back.
Will be really welcome.
So I mean, I think it is going to be slow, and productivity has been greater at home than a lot of the businesses thought. But I think, and now from July the 4th, if things open up, I think there is a demand. People need a change of scenery. People do want to come back into office, but there's others that don't. So most of the business I talk to are being very flexible and saying, you know, if you want to go into the office, you can. But as I said, my guess is July will be a testing period. August is slow because you know it's holiday time. But September, hopefully, you will see a very big pickup. Now, we need tourists as well, and you would have lots of tourists come to your restaurant, and that's where hopefully in the next 2 weeks we'll get some of these bridges, and people will come into the city as well from overseas. I mean, if anything, it's a great time to come to London because it's going to be reasonably quiet, and you can have London to yourself, so to speak. But it is going to be slow. But as I said, we are really conscious at the City of London Corporation how we can try and get people back into the square mile and get the likes of your business up and running again.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Juan, for your question. Okay, so now our next question is from Albert Cole, who is a board member of the Spanish Chamber, and he is from Bank Santander, Sabadell Bank, sorry.
Sabadell.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's a pleasure to see you again. I think last time we met was Mansion House, so it's very good to see you with us.
Good to see you, Albert.
And thank you also for the comments about the investment in Edinburgh by TSB. I had the pleasure to have discussion with Lord Grimston a few weeks back, and I think we are obviously, as Sabadell owners, as TSB, we're totally committed to our investment in the UK. My question is regarding something similar to what has been asked already, but more specifically, and looking at the guidance that was published yesterday by Boris Johnson. And you also mentioned the reduction from 2 meters to 1 meters, which is a very positive development. I'm sure you've also seen the article in the FT yesterday about the status of banks returning to their premises and some of the large players making bold statements in regards to large buildings. We ourselves have the headquarters in the Leadenhall building, and it's a very big building, and people are still very scared to go back. So the question for you is, with everything you said and the new rules and regulations, and the fact that the government guidance is still, as of today, to work from home for those that can, yes. What is the threat for the City of London that there will be kind of a place for meeting only? And I'm also saying that very conscious that, you know, technologically, and you mentioned the fintechs, for example. I mean, TSB itself, they have the IT platform on the cloud. So decentralizing is a reality, and the working from home has accelerated that. So the question is, what threat do you think that represents, not necessarily for next year, but midterm for the City of London, considering the price gap that we have in the UK versus London itself?
It's a very good question, Albert. I do think things will potentially change. It will be individual businesses, but to Stuart Lupton, and he's built the huge new building on Bishopsgate that is due to open, which was the pinnacle. I think it's 22 Bishopsgate. He feels that they're confident they will fill their building despite this because of a number of reasons. Coming back, one is to the culture bit. Two is quite a lot of businesses. I mean, for me, some of the best ideas are sometimes around the coffee machine. Just the interaction, which you can't have necessarily over Zoom. But I do think that businesses will take a very hard look, and in some cases will not need so much space. But the other thing that a lot of the CEOs and businesses, which I'm sure you're coming across, is mental health. Now, I've been, people are sitting at home, and that dividing line between business and personal is gone. So when you leave home, yes, you could have a nightmare commute, but when you get to the office, it's a different environment. It's a change. People need change sometimes, and just sitting, working at home, and then, in some cases, having to look after your young children or whatever, it is very difficult. And people, human beings, I think, like a bit of change, at different locations, but also interacting with one's colleagues. So look, I agree, the tech's going to be there, productivity is higher than people thought, and there are some who really are, as you say, nervous and what don't want to come in. There are others who do want to come in. So I think it will be a balance. What you may have with your office is that some people may say, well, I'm going to come in 3 days a week and work home Mondays and Fridays. And as I said, you're going to have a red team or 1 week and a blue team another week. So it is going to change. I don't call it the new norm. I've come up with a new word, which is repositioned normality. And that is what's going to happen. So I think we'd be kidding ourselves if there weren't going to be changes, but we're still confident in the city that the office space will still be used. There are a huge amount of tech companies that come in and will want to use some of that space as well, rather than just working from home. So it is going to be a balance. It's going to be interesting to watch. I hope very much that we don't have suddenly an empty city. I think that wouldn't be good for the City of London, but also for businesses, because as I've said earlier, one of the great strengths of what we have in London, and this, is the ecosystem. You can walk from one building to another, go and have a conversation with a lawyer, go and meet. That ecosystem you don't have on Zoom. And that personal relationships you don't have on Zoom. But Nick, jump in as well, because I'm sure you've got something on this.
Oh, I was just going to say, I heard the other day one of the very large international banks, the CEO had said, look, we're going to go back to work, because you can service existing customers for a period of time remotely. But when you're trying to get new business, and the point I think you made earlier on, Lord Mayor, about the culture, or particularly of trading floors, you want everybody back. So he wasn't putting a deadline on it. I would think it's a phased in over 6 months. And I think you and I, Lord Mayor, heard from one of your, Albert, one of your peers, one of your competitors, say the same thing. They had a third of the staff, mostly the young people, I think, desperate to get back now, and a third of the staff, probably the older ones commuting in with kids at school, who were happy to wait 6 months, and then the other third sort of the middle. But I think that's right. I think people will steadily come back.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Albert.
Brilliant. Thank you, Albert, for your question, and Nick and Lord Mayor. Okay, our next question is from Sergio Ravic Calafel, who is from UniCredit Bank.
Oh.
Is Sergio, are you with us?
Sorry, I was on mute, as the mayor said earlier.
No worries.
And I don't really know how to connect my camera. I don't know whether you can see me.
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much for being with us this morning, Lord Mayor. I would like to ask you a question regarding a practical question regarding the coming back to the office, and as you said, public transport. We are trying. We're in the process of trying to get, and as you can see, I'm at my office. I'm doing three days in, 2 days at home. The most difficult bit of bringing people to the office is public transport at the moment. So scores of people have resorted to buying bicycles and cycling. However, there is a problem in actually parking the bike in the city. And those of us who are commuting by car find ourselves that the car parks around the area are empty, but the prices are really expensive still. And I just wonder whether, at least for a period of things until things get a bit more normal, the city could take some action, perhaps in facilitating, bringing cycle racks or something, and thinking of perhaps facilitating some people at least to commute by car, because I think it's crucial. The transport I see much more difficult than the actual office space in terms of bringing people. And thank you.
No problem. And I hear you, and we've heard this. I mean, firstly, just on the driving, so we don't decide the congestion charge, just by the way, and I know what's happened going from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. for 7 days a week. We have pushed back very hard to Sadiq Khan about that, particularly on Sundays. People don't know we have, over 35 wonderful churches in the square mile, and people come from all over London to these churches on Sunday, but now, and would drive and park their car because it was, you didn't get fined. Now they're going to have to pay £15. So we're still pushing back on that. And let's hope we get a change. I hear you on the bikes, Nick. We will feed that back to the team, and just bear with us, because there is a little bit. We're trying various things, and we will get things wrong, no doubt, because we've never been in this situation, and then we will adapt when things start to come back. One of the things I did hear, which is a thought for you, for one office, is they've put up hooks on the reception walls so people can hang their bikes up within the office. Now, if you have a Brompton bike, then you can carry your bike. So there are a few adaptations that I think wherever where your office is, that the management team of the office can look at and ask them, how can we put bikes inside? Maybe you just have an area in the reception on the left area where there's some bike racks as well. It doesn't always have to be outside, but that is something that we should think about. On the car parking, we'll also take that back. I mean, we don't own a lot of the car parks. They're privately owned, but it does seem a pity that they're maybe putting up prices as an opportunity, and we will feed those 2 points back, and so that our team know about it, and just say that we hear you on that.
That's great. Thank you so much, Alderman.
Thank you.
I would just add one. We are tracking. I mean, not my team, but our colleagues, Lord Mayor's colleagues, are tracking the data in incredible detail, and I can't remember, Sergio, what the percentage of car park capacity is, but we've been tracking it day by day, and it is increasing day by day, and it's getting up quite high, car parks actually, because of course people were driving, not coming on public transport. But I'm not sure we track the bikes, but we'll check. Yeah, we'll come back to you.
That's good. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sergio, for your question, and Lord Mayor and Nick. Okay, another question we have now, which is from Salvador Allende from Gabtech. And the question is, you mentioned, Lord Mayor, that we should not be neglecting environmental care. And I agree that we should all be playing our part to lower CO2 emissions. So how do you think that the City of London is also working towards this goal?
Well, a number of ways. So just stepping back in history, back in the early 1950s, the City of London used to, a lot of the offices had coal fires, and the Clean Air Act, I think it was 1952, we were the first to pass that to ban coal fires in the Square Mile, and other areas of London followed us. So we are doing a lot. I mean, around the air quality. Sergio, is the last thing you probably want to hear is, but ultimately I think we want no cars in the Square Mile, probably in the long term. But at the moment, that's not the case, and we're flexible. But people have noticed the quality of air has improved during COVID-19, and we're very keen to keep that going. We're very keen to help with climate change, and the financing. The financial sector is going to be a critical part of that. We have something called the Green Finance Institute, which is the CEO is Anne-Marie Thomas, and they've started to bring out a whole lot of research around how financial banks, etc., can help around the green sector. We work very closely with Mark Carney, who, as you know, is the past governor of the Bank of England. He is the COP26 envoy for the UN and the advisor to the Prime Minister. And he says, he talks about the 3 R's. He talks about the reporting, and a lot of that is around the reporting is going to be very important from public companies, from companies across the board. And what could easily happen is that you've seen how all these ESG funds have proliferated in the last number of years. What could easily happen is that the asset managers will not invest in companies unless they do the right things sustainably. And I think the shareholders are going to have a big say in that. However, there is this transition period, and Royal Dutch Shell and BP are 2 examples of companies transitioning away from fossil fuel and getting more involved in green. So we're helping in that. And, you know, there's a huge amount of financing around buildings, because a lot of the CO2 and the emissions come from buildings. So we've got to refurbish buildings by 2050. And a lot of this needs finance. The good news is that there seems to be a lot of capital around the world interested in investing in the sector. And it's something that we will be working very closely with companies. So we're doing a great deal. There's a social impact investing institute we've set up. And that's all about how we can invest the right way. We have a whole COP26 team, a whole green team, as I call them. And I just did a call literally this week with China, who we have a joint venture with China around a green institute. So we are doing a lot in this area, and I think is absolutely critical, as does the corporation. And we need to encourage as many financial institutions and companies to be involved and to recognise the importance of ESG and the green finance sector. But Nick, add to that.
No, I would endorse everything you said. I mean, we see huge interest from the firms in sustainable investment, and the message we get back from the fund managers globally, actually, not just in the UK, is they're looking for long-term infrastructure projects, and the money, there's a wall of money there.
Very good.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor and Nick. Okay, we've just got, just to finish off now, we have 2 last questions which have come in from anonymous people asking them. So the first one is, with regards to Brexit, do you see any systematic risks of an ill-designed New Deal in areas such as trade settlements or fragmentation of markets, which are systematically robust due to the pooling of trade from all players? That's the first
so I'm going to pass this one over to Nick, because he's the expert on this. So Nick.
Well, if it's about generally goods, as it were, you know, and trading and settling goods, then obviously we hope that there will be a deal which essentially removes barriers. So, you know, a quota-free, tariff-free trade deal. And I don't know, I would say that's 50-50 perhaps at the moment. And obviously that benefits exporters, importers, and indeed customers on both sides. In services, and obviously we in the city are largely about financial and professional services, there are going to be frictions, as we said earlier on. You know, passporting goes. There's hope, I think, that you get some access with the professions. That's largely, I think, down actually to each member state. But we're leaving the single market, and obviously that has consequences. In terms of friction, I mean, I think most firms are working very hard to ensure there is no friction for the customers. Obviously, there's some element of what's called repapering of the customers. So, you know, a Spanish client of a bank in London is going to have to repaper to the branch or the subsidiary in Spain, and vice versa for British customers of Spanish firms. But I think that's well underway, that repapering exercise, and on hopes that there won't be any additional sort of frictions. and somebody asked earlier about equivalence. So some bits of the equivalence regime, can you trade on platforms, exchanges, if you like, in each other's markets? Can you use each other's clearing houses? Can you swap information between those of you who work in the firms themselves? Can supervisors share information with each other? All those kind of things, we hope they will minimize too. So I guess in services, there's a one-off change because your license goes and you have to reset up. But underneath that, we hope that most of the services will remain reasonably seamless. So I hope the answer is not too much friction at the end of the day.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Nick, and Lord Mayor as well. Okay, so now we have our last question to finish, which is, do you think that Brexit can place the advantage of a non-London, non-EU hub competitors such as Hong Kong, Singapore, or New York?
So say that again. Do I think?
Do you think because of, I think that what they mean to say is, can obviously London being what it's going to be following Brexit at the end of this year, do you think that that can play to the advantage of the attractiveness of cities outside of the European Union, such as New York, Singapore, Hong Kong?
No, I mean, I don't think so, because I think London has more than all those cities. I think London, it's more than just the financial sector. London is an incredible place to live. The culture, the arts, the diversity of London, and around the financial sector. I look at New York, and New York is our biggest competitor. And a good competitor, and I work for American banks all my life. But I look at something like green finance, and I look at something like fintech, and they aren't where we are. I always joke with my American friends that I think it's only just now that chip and pin has been introduced in America, and we don't even, and we've had it here for 25 years. And then if you look across the way, when it comes to climate change and green, no one really looks to America as well, because they have a president who doesn't believe in climate change. So we have our advantages, we have our time zone advantages, we have our language advantages as well. And I think it is something, and the rule of law, which I keep coming back to. So look, we always will have competitors, and yes, other places will benefit. And you look at Hong Kong and their situation, we all know Singapore will probably benefit from that if it stays that way. But also I think Tokyo will benefit massively from what's been going on in Hong Kong. But in all the calls I've done, and I'm not going to name the banks, but 5 or 6 of them made it categorically clear that they would invest more in the UK and more in London. And that made me feel very positive about the future. By default, we're always going to lose some people because you can't have a dominating market position like that. And if, the likes of JP Morgan are opening a new offices in Paris, and by the way, I do think Macron has played a blinder as far as attracting financial companies to Paris, then that's going to happen. But JP Morgan aren't necessarily taking a mass of people from their offices here in London. It's actually part of their global expansion. So I'm optimistic and positive. Others benefit massively. Some will in a small way, but I don't see a huge change. But Nick, hopefully you'll reiterate all that.
Yes, no, I totally agree. And by the way, one of the points that we make when we are in capitals, either remotely or physically, whether it's Madrid or Paris or indeed Berlin, and of course as well as Brussels, is London is precisely as the Lord Mayor said, is an international centre. For people doing their international fund management. You talked earlier about Latin America. The international funds investing in Latin America, the reinsurance markets, the capital markets. German companies raising their debt. From Japanese investors is all intermediated typically in London. And so the point we make to the Europeans is, why would you cut off the access from European firms to that international market? So, and I think that message slowly gets through. And if you do that, those markets, the international markets, commodities is perhaps the best example. Many industrial companies in Europe want access to, German car companies, to use an example, need to trade, hedge their positions in commodities, in metals, for example. Europe doesn't produce any metals. Those markets are not here. You can access them easily through London. And if you close access to London, you're closing access to an international market. And that will go not to, I'm afraid that's not going to go to Madrid or Paris or Berlin. That market could go to New York or Singapore or somewhere. So you've got to sort of get that message across. But at the moment, I agree. London is in this time zone, of course, it is and will continue to be the major international centre. Yeah.
Great.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lord Mayor, and Nick as well, for sharing with your insight with us. We really appreciate it so much. Okay, so now we're just joined by Javier San Basilio, who of Mapfre Insurance, is a very, very large Spanish insurance provider. Javier is also a board member of the Spanish Chamber. So I'm just handing over to Javier to say some final words.
Javier.
Well, thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Thank you very much, Nick, and everyone attending. And I think it's very clear for us what the importance of such an institution as the City of London is. I don't think there are many other institutions around the world where you can have a mix of tradition with the history of the City of London, with its 692 Lord Mayors, as well as a modern the modern attributes, the interest in fintech, the interest in the modern world and in the international expansion. By definition, I don't think, again, that any other country has an asset like this. And when you were saying, or you were discussing about the possibility of other cities being competitors for to the City of London, yes, there are. In the industry I'm in the reinsurance industry, there's nothing like the City of London. The City of London is the square mile, but the City of Reinsurance is the square 300 yards. Because if you're more than 300 yards away from Lloyd's, you're not in the industry, and that is something that is only existent in London. I think you are doing a wonderful job in promoting the city, in adapting the city, because the city will change as everything else will change after COVID and after Brexit. But the city was there long before COVID, long before Brexit, and so was Spain, and so were the trade relationships between the UK and Spain, and in particularly with the City of London. I mean, the city is for all the Spanish young talented professionals sort of a dream destination. And I mean, you despite the fantastic spring that we've had and the addition of Hispania to the delicacies of the City of London, we didn't come here for the weather or for the food. We came here for the opportunities that the city brings us. And you can never, you can't find such a close network and such an amount of talent, capabilities, technical resources and financial resources anywhere else in the world. For us, for Mapfre, being present here as a reinsurance operator, this brings us the opportunity to do business not only with the European friends, we also have offices in the continent, but to see our Japanese clients, to see our Australian clients, our New Zealand clients, our South Africans. They come to London because they can visit 8 operators in one go. In one day, they can have 8 productive business meetings in the City of London, and this only happens in the City of London. It doesn't happen anywhere else. I absolutely agree that the office is not dead, but I also agree that the office has to change. And it's going to be, the City of London is going to be sort of a quality business tourist destination, if you wish, high-level meetings, but you don't really need to have telephone operators and stuff like that in the city. It's too expensive, but just make the best of it. And thank you very much, from Mayor, for all the messages you're giving us. And thank you very much, Nick, for mentioning the reinsurance industry, which is very unknown in the wide open world, but is very relevant in the city. No, it's very relevant in the city.
Xavier,
yeah, sorry.
No, go on, you finish.
No, I was just about to say that, I mean, the electronic placement mechanisms, the exchanges, the blockchains, the Zooms, they're all fantastic, and they are there to facilitate our work. But the personal relationships, the networks, those cannot be replaced. And I've never seen anybody, I mean, we've all, and as I think I know who Nick was talking about when he mentioned one of the large bank heads. We have all been very productive because we had the relationships already built before the pandemic. But I haven't seen any of my colleagues selling a single policy to a new client through a video conference, and that is a challenge. And Lord Mayor, I think two phrases that you use: the unique ecosystem for the city is a perfect description of what it is, and the positive message of the Triple B, the build back better. That's what we have to do. I mean, learn from the new situation and try to build an even better city of London. Thank you very much.
Xavier, thank you. You were so good. I'm going to have to take you on a trip promoting the City of London. You've absolutely nailed it there. And someone taught me early on that the City of London is tradition and modernity at the same time. Yep. And you're absolutely right. And it's one of our huge strengths. So, I assure you, we now have 3 aldermen in the Court of Aldermen, which means that they could go on to be Lord Mayor from the insurance business. You're well represented. Because I think the insurance sector is 26% of the total business in the City of London. So thank you for all your support. And thank you everyone for listening. And thank you for Nick for being there. Pleasure. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. All the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.